Hello and welcome everyone. Just give it another 20 seconds or so as everybody comes in and gets settled in. Welcome to our webinar today. All right. Well, thanks for being with us. We're excited to have you. My name's Julie Sauve. I'm one of the senior implementation specialists here at Harmony, and I'm thrilled to be your moderator today for this session. So whether you've joined us on one of our webinars before, or if you are new to Harmony, we're excited that you're joining us. And we host these webinars to bring together thought leaders and educators to explore best teaching practices and strategies that advance well-being and healthy relationships, so we can create the conditions where every learner can succeed. These presentations are not the opinions of Harmony necessarily, and our content are of our guest speakers. Remember that all registrants will receive a copy of the recording to watch that you can share with your colleagues, so be on a lookout for that in your email. During our time together today, we'll explore the following objectives. First, we're going to spend some time reflecting on how change can affect relationships, trust, and organizational culture, identifying practices that foster connection and belonging during times of transition, and developing plans to strengthen a culture of belonging for the new school year. But before we get started, we'd actually love to hear from our audience, to hear from you through a short poll. We'd like to find out what has been some of the biggest challenges during periods of change in your organizations. So on your screen, it should have just popped up a quick poll that you can go ahead and take a moment to answer. The question is, what is your biggest challenge during periods of change in your organization? Now, we know all of these can be challenges. We're interested to hear of these, which ones you feel like is the biggest challenge, particularly so that our amazing presenter and panelists today can address your particular needs. We'll just give it a few more seconds with the poll open. And Amanda, if you don't mind sharing the results. So as you can see, all of these are pretty big challenges for us, particularly maintaining staff morale and focus on well-being is something that seems to be on your minds, as well as managing competing priorities. So again, all of these are incredibly important. We look forward to hearing from our panelists and presenter today so that we can hopefully walk away addressing some of these challenges and helping you feel more equipped as you start the school year with some strategies and ideas on how you can support these particular elements of change. And I know you came to hear from our amazing presenter and panelists, so it's my honor to share with you a bit about each of their backgrounds so that you know who we get to speak or hear from today. So first, we have our presenter, Richard Carranza, who has 3 decades of service in public education. Richard has held leadership roles at every level. He began his career as a bilingual social studies and music teacher, later becoming a high school principal. He served as a superintendent in Houston during Hurricane Harvey, in San Francisco during multiple earthquakes, and most recently as chancellor in New York City schools during the COVID-19 pandemic. Obviously, he has learned firsthand about the importance of focusing on the needs of the community during times of crisis and dramatic change. So welcome, Richard. We're so excited to hear from you. Joining Richard today is the rest of our incredible panel, which includes Michael Ramirez, who is the Chief of Staff for Duval County Public Schools in Jacksonville, Florida. Michael serves as a liaison between the superintendent and district divisions, providing senior leadership with direction on strategic initiatives, ensuring alignment across the entire organization. So thank you for being with us, Michael. We also have Alejandro Diasgranados, or Mr. Diaz, as I was told, who is an award-winning educator at Seton Elementary School in Washington, D.C., where he works to foster student belonging and strengthen school community partnerships. He was named the 2021 DC Teacher of the Year and the 2020 National University Teacher of the Year. So congratulations on those honors and also welcome Dr. Diaz. And finally, we have Dr. Leslie Torres-Rodriguez, who is the Superintendent of Schools for the East. I'm going to say it wrong, so please correct me, Leslie. Ramapo?
Ramapo.
Ramapo, thank you, Central School District. She also served for 8 years as the superintendent and CEO of Hartford Public Schools, Connecticut's capital city school district, holding the longest tenure of any woman superintendent in the district's history. And at the start of July, she started her new role, serving over 37,000 students from over 47 countries and various socioeconomic backgrounds in Rockland County, New York. So congratulations and welcome, Dr. Torres Rodriguez. And in true Harmony fashion, for those of you that are familiar with our program, we love to provide the opportunity to connect. So we're going to start off our conversation today by going around and asking each of our panelists as well as our presenter to share with us their response to the selected Quick Connection card. So the question for each of you is, what do you wish you could spend more time doing? And let's go around and hear what everybody has to say, and then we'll move towards listening to your presentation, Richard.
I can share first.
Thanks.
Just
Get me
because a
started.
teacher on summertime, definitely traveling. Definitely wish I could travel more. I always say that traveling is like an adult field trip. Like that feeling you get when you get on the plane is the same feeling kids get when they get on that bus on that field trip day. So absolutely traveling.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing. And I agree.
Yeah, I'll share next. I wish I could spend more time exploring new musical instruments. So just no expectation except I'm going to fiddle and figure it out and just have uninterrupted time to just joyfully play with a new instrument. That's what I wish I had more time.
I love that. And as a former music teacher, Richard, I'm assuming you'll probably play a lot of instruments, but which is your favorite?
It's got to be my ride or die, my guitarrón.
Very good. Thank you.
I will share. I would love to spend more time hanging out and talking to my family, especially my kids. Our youngest is heading off to college, and I am counting the days. And so I just want to grab as much time as possible, and just continue to learn as they continue to grow. So, family.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and share. I wish I could, if I could spend more time just traveling the country, state to state. I got a goal of hitting all 50 states, and so just spending time with family, traveling with my girls and my wife would be amazing to be able to do that. So got a short piece of that over the summer, but there's never enough time for that.
Well, thank you for sharing. And Michael, you just kind of tied together both Alejandro and Leslie's with both family and travel, which sounds like a great plan. Well, thank you for sharing and for letting us get to know you just a little bit better. I'm going to turn the time over now to Richard for his presentation to really be talking about change and what we can do as leaders or as educators to help set both the educators in our system as well as the adults and the students up for success. So with that, turn the time over to you, Richard.
Great. Thank you, Julie. And I also want to thank everyone for taking time to join us on the webinar today. And I also want to thank Sanford Harmony for hosting this very important conversation, and as well to my fellow panelists. Any one of them could be doing the presentation. And my goal is to start the conversation by which we can then have a conversation about this topic. So I also want to remind you, please don't be shy. Put your questions into the chat. We're going to try to, in real time, respond to some of those questions, and then we'll have time at the end as well. So, Julie, next slide, please. So, leadership during change, and I can't emphasize this enough. People before process. It's always going to be people. So every time change is experienced, people experience it differently. And what I've done culling through the literature I've kind of categorized it into three groups, three buckets, if you will, that will encompass change. One is technical change. And an example of technical change, it's you have a new curriculum, you have new policies or a new system, a new way of checking students in or dropping students off. Those are just new things. That's technical. We just have to follow the rules. That creates some semblance of stress. So you just have to understand that all change is going to create stress. How do we ameliorate the stress? Second bucket is adaptive change. And examples are cultural shifts, equity work, and organizational transformation. For example, I still remember when in an office setting, we created nursing rooms. And was that a big deal? It was a huge deal because, I don't know how my female colleagues, my women colleagues did it before we had nursing rooms, especially as young mothers. So that was a cultural adaptive change that was very necessary, but it's still required to be adaptive in terms of how we address the change. And the third is traumatic change. No one has to think twice about the pandemic, but we also experience it in different ways. Community violence, natural disasters, political unrest, immigration fears. I'm coming to you right now from an airport, but I was recently, yesterday, speaking to a whole community that's a very agricultural community, a beautiful community, but they're living in fear because they don't know on what day, what morning, when kids are walking to school and people are going to work, vans are going to show up and people with covering their faces are going to show up and take people away. There's a real fear. That's traumatic, and we just have to recognize that that's traumatic. So what if there's anything I want us to remember with these three buckets is that people don't experience change as a strategic plan. Well, we have a plan to address every single thing that's going to happen. No, you don't. You may have a beautiful document, you may have a beautiful binder, but you don't have a plan, because unless that plan is very, very, very heavily dependent on how you're going to take care of your people. People experience all change emotionally, whether it's technical, traumatic, or adaptive. It's all going to be experienced emotionally. Julie, next slide. So what do communities need during trauma? This is only based on my experiences, but I will tell you it changes how people show up. So the students need to know that they're safe before you can even think about learning and relationships. And I know that one of the things that lots of folks are very tempted to do is to say, oh, we're going to get right back and jump right back into the rigorous curriculum because that's what we need to start the healing process. Yes, but no, right? It goes all the way back to Maslow. You got to be safe before you're able to lower that affective filter to be able to even learn and show up to learn. So students need safety. I would also say staff needs to feel safe, but they also need support. And they need support before accountability. And they need to trust the leadership before they will engage with any transformation. So for example, during my time as superintendent in the Houston Independent School District, we had a little natural weather event called Hurricane Harvey. And when the great swaths of Houston were flooded, we lost 72% of our district was underwater. So what are we going to do? Well, the first thing we did, we made some good decisions. We pre-positioned buses and we pre-positioned food and we pre-positioned some things. But the very first thing we did was, are people safe? What do they need? And then those pre-positioned buses we used in consultation with the city to transport people from danger zones to areas of safety. We always made sure people were first. So you must think, well, then why was that important? Why weren't you taking care of opening up, your school so you could get back to the business of being a city? Well, I'll tell you, in comparison, when Hurricane Katrina flooded New Orleans, it took that school district 6 months, and I'm making Castino's version, it took them 6 months to open their schools again. In Houston, because we took care of people first, we opened our schools back up in 2 weeks post Hurricane Harvey. So when people feel safe, believe me, they're not going to punch the clock. They're going to do what they need to do to to help the community. And then the most important thing is families need honesty before confidence and partnership and before participation. You can't ask them to trust you until they feel like they can trust you. So as transparent as you can be, I would encourage you to always be as transparent as you can be. And if you don't know the answer to a question, say, we don't have the answer to that yet. We're working through. Don't make it up as you go. Because there's nothing that will destroy the confidence of your community faster. And again, trust is built long before it's needed. You're already building those trusting relationships and those deep partnerships. But believe me, all of those really trusted relationships and deep partnerships will be tested during a crisis. And that test, if you're tending to those relationships, that test will not only yield such positive results, but it'll help you get through whatever crisis may be at hand. Next slide, Julie. So next two slides, I'm just going to give you some commitments that build belonging. Again, this is based on my experience having weathered the pandemic in New York City, having weathered the flooding in Houston, having weathered earthquakes in San Francisco. So first and foremost, be visible, show up where people are if it's safe to do so. Obviously, when the buildings were flooded, we couldn't go to flooded buildings. So if it's safe to do so, show up to where people are. Communicate early and often. Silence lets people create their own narrative of what's happening and their own accounting of what the facts are. Add to that social media, add to that influencers, add to that podcasts, and you name it. The narrative gets built very quickly if you're not, as much as possible, communicating early, often, and accurately. Always listen before you solve the problem. People want support, and they want support in helping shape how they're going to respond to the challenges that they're dealing with. I can't express this enough. Lead with humanity. I'm not saying that you have to cry in front of your staff. I'm not saying you have to cry on camera, but I will be the first to tell you I have cried on camera. I have cried with my staff, and I haven't held it back. Why? Because people need to understand that as leaders, you put that armor on often, but during a crisis, you are just as exposed as everyone else. You're leading often 1 minute, one hour ahead of everyone else because your information is so quick. So lead with humility. People are going to remember how you made people feel during that crisis rather than what you said, rather than what your strategic plan said, etc. And so the most important work of leadership during change is really strengthening relationships, as you could tell. Next slide, Julie. And then here's my call to action. For students, what's our call to action? How will every child know that they belong? And that starts way before a crisis. So how do we know that the child knows that we belong? So I'm going to ask you that question as we launch this new school year. For staff, how does every employee know that they're valued? It's not as easy as sending everybody a note every day, say, you are valued. No, but it's the little things. It's the little things when people are setting up their bulletin boards and you come in and you give them a hand for a little bit. It's the little things like you just show up with donuts or bagels or, oh, I'm sorry, carrot sticks and celery because we want to be nutrition. I'm sorry. It's the little things, right? In Spanish, my first language, we say son los detalles. It's the details. That's how staff is going to know, and every employee is going to know that they're valued. For our families, how do they know they're welcome? How do you greet them? Where do you greet them? How do they feel when you welcome them? If at all possible, how many languages do we welcome them? So again, how would you welcome someone into the living room, into your living room? Should be how we welcome them into our public schools. And then for yourself, my friends, we often forget to take care of ourselves, but please remember, if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anyone else. So how are you going to model hope and steadiness and compassion? And when things happen, we're in the role for a reason. So how do we then model for others often uncharted, unproven paths through a crisis? So it's not another initiative. Don't think of it as an initiative. Just think of everything I've just talked a little bit about as a foundation that allows everything else to succeed. Because if people don't feel safe, they don't feel included, they don't feel like they have a voice, then when the crisis comes, you're doing triple duty. You're trying to build those relationships while you're also navigating through uncharted territory called the crisis. So with that, I'm looking forward to our discussion. I cannot wait to hear from the true varsity on this team, Michael, Leslie, and Alejandro, who are going to share such valuable insights. So with that, I'm going to toss it back to you, Julie.
Well, thank you so much. And I think, Richard, on each of those points that you've shared, we could just dive in probably and spend hours just unpacking and discussing each of these. But like you said, we have this amazing varsity team here to share with us. So we're going to turn the time over now to really hear you lead a conversation with our esteemed panelists. And as we're doing that, I'll just encourage you to consider, we would love to hear Alejandro, Michael, and Leslie, we would love to hear your thoughts on not only the things that Richard brought up, but also your thoughts and experiences on managing change. Whether that be, whatever, wherever you are at your seat in the organization, whether it be as a leader or from the educator perspective, what that looks like for leaders who have been exemplary or modeled that for us. So I'm going to turn the time over to you all now to listen and absorb your wisdom and turn the time back to you, Richard.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think, everything that we've kind of tossed out there for consideration, I would love to get the teacher's perspective. So could I just call on our friend, Dr. Diasgranados? Doc, could you, what are your thoughts and your reflections based on what we've so far talked about?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing. I thoroughly enjoyed everything you shared. There's so many things that you said that stuck out to me. One of the biggest things was leading with humility and with humanity. I recall a meeting that was a tough meeting that our principal had to have with us at the end of the school year. We're moving school buildings, and it's just been a process, so it takes a lot of steps. And it's the end of the school year, and the entire school is pretty much very tired. We've done everything did, and through the middle of the presentation, our principal just takes this giant yawn, and it like all of us kind of collectively yawned together, and it just made her more human. It made us just understand that she's tired too. We're all in this together, and it definitely wasn't on purpose. She tried to hide it, but we all just kind of laughed together, and that moment just really just brought us all together. And it's hard work, but we're all in this together. And even our leader is right there with us, tired and working right shoulder to shoulder with us. So that really made us feel like a good, strong team.
Hey, sure appreciate that. The humanity is always good to show because, we get tired too. So that's a great example. I'm wondering, Dr. Torres-Rodriguez, what are your reflections?
Yeah, Richard, I appreciated the distinction between the technical, adaptive, and what's coming up for me is that when I think about change, I've learned that there are it's like a two parallel journey, right? The organizational journey or the response to the crisis, and then there's the humanistic journey that you all, right, that we're talking about. And I can't help it, right? We're in the business of education, so I can't help but apply a social behavioral science to this, where I think about it as change, yes, could be like the strategic operational process, but it's so social, it's so emotional, and it's so behavioral. And people want to know whatever the change is or whatever we're grappling with, like, am I safe? To your point, Richard, what am I losing? Do I trust the people that are leading me through this? What am I going to be supported? So these are the questions that I think we all know are underneath the surface, and sometimes we tend to overlook those. And so it's how are we going to support our teachers, for example, or students in making meaning that comes with the change? Like, why does it matter? Why is it happening now? So trying to connect what you were saying about technical adaptive change and what sits behind that, because we're human beings and our brains like to make meaning of things.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And we will make meaning of things. So the clarity is probably really, really important as well, and really appreciate that perspective. Michael, you sit in a really powerful but really interesting role where you kind of translate policy into action, and you kind of have an accountability arm, but really kind of a, a let me convince you arm.
Yeah.
Wow. I'd love to hear your thoughts about change and how do you navigate those waters every day?
No, Richard, I appreciate that. And I think a couple of things resonate with me. You shared and you started with like this is a people business, right? It's about the relationships and you build that with you put trust and that's built over time. And I always like to say, and trust is like deposits you're making in a bank, right? And every day you're making deposits in to at some point potentially have to withdraw, whether it's during a time of crisis, during a time of organizational change, whatever that might be. And I think what resonated most is the intentionality around what you have to do, right? Is you got to be really intentional in the various stakeholders that you named as you think about whatever the change is, right? Whether it's a community going through a consolidation or a school closure, whether it's a traumatic event that they have to be informed, and the fact that everything says something, regardless of whether you're communicating or not. And silence says something too. And that silence sometimes creates what you named, like the fear, the uncertainty around things. And so we're in roles that are critical to leading within our communities and making sure that we're really intentional around that and thinking about all of the various stakeholders that are impacted by change, by an event, and whatever that might be. And so I just really appreciated how you articulated that and framed it in a way with, some of the examples, with earthquakes and, hurricanes in Texas and, living in Florida and obviously having gone through, Hurricane Ian and a number of different, tragic situations here in the state and really thinking about, but that intentionality, the communication, but at the end of the day, it's about people, and the better we're able to connect in a way that seems authentic, not just, and understanding, you want to communicate and you want to provide information and be treated the way you would want to be treated. So you want to treat people that way as well in that communication, particularly in times of change, because it's really understanding that it's personal for people, right? It's a personal piece, and so with that personal, like Leslie mentioned, there's an emotional connection to whatever that change is or not, and so just trying to navigate that. So I think that's what resonates with it.
Sure do appreciate your reflections, Michael. And I think the emphasis on how do you prepare for change, not necessarily how do you have all the answers for every possible scenario with change is probably the common through thread that I'm hearing amongst all of us that have spoken to this point. So I have a question. I'm going to kind of put it out there and hopefully it resonates with you. But here's my question. The question is this. As you think about navigating change, what's the first thing you think about that affects you personally when you are grappling with change? So for example, let me go first, just so I can model what I'm talking about. So whenever I'm dealing with change, and I've given lots of examples of traumatic change, which puts me very much mentally in a very kind of an operation mode. Okay, got to take care of this, got to take care of this, got to take care of this. But when I'm thinking more of the emotional, the adaptive change, one of the things I always have to worry about is asking the question, why now? Is this really important? And obviously, if there's a change that's happening and it's happening, it's important. So I always find myself kind of defaulting into a opposition, maybe too strong of a word, but of a I'm not going to go with this flow. I have to understand why, rather than just say, "Oh, makes sense. Let's go." That's what I have to. So I'm curious, when you're dealing with change, any one of the three types of buckets that I've talked about, what do you have to think about personally before you can be the leader in the change that's coming down the road.
So I'll kick off with and I'll take the role of leading through crisis, all right? And when in leading through that space and uh having had some experience in that place, unfortunately, navigating a community through a school shooting and having had to deal with that piece as well as hurricanes. I think for me, making sure that that home is okay first. Like I got to take care. I can't be my best self at work if the home piece isn't taken care of. So being really intentional for me around knowing that that change or that is going to demand more of my time. So I need to make sure that everything at home is in order for me to be my best self at work. I think for me, that's how I organize myself to say. And again, because these jobs are ones that we share with significant others, spouses, partners, and so I would say it's always a kitchen. These leadership roles are a kitchen table conversation before anything else, and knowing that it's a commitment by not just you, but obviously your spouse or your partner, your significant other. So making sure for me, I have to navigate making sure that's in order so that I can give my best self during the change.
I'm going to extend on that because I think for me is that and seeking information, and maybe to what you were alluding to, Richard, as well, because I know that information alone doesn't lead to the change in me, right? But I still need to try to understand it so that I can determine, do I have the conditions that I need to be able to be effective at the change? Do I have the capability, right? Do I know what is being asked? Am I motivated? Do I believe this matters to me and my value and my mission? Do I have the opportunity to do this? Do I really have the tools, the authority to do this and lead myself through this? And then I often think about, okay, what are the social conditions? What context am I in? What are people around me actually doing? So I seek that information so that then I can get to, Michael, what you're saying. Do I have other competing priorities, for example? Do I need support? Because at the end of it, I also question, is there a threat to my identity? Is this calling me to show up as something else than what I already know? So those are some of the things that are immediately I seek to understand. And I appreciate that question, Richard.
Oof, powerful words of wisdom. Um, Alejandro.
Yeah, absolutely. From a teacher's perspective, I think a lot of times teachers are or feel like that we are just the given the change and we have no control or no power or no space to do anything from that. I kind of push back on that as a teacher leader. I usually try to give our leadership some support and ask where they need help, and maybe it's with through the messaging. Maybe it's through gathering other teachers and letting them know that they can also contribute to this change. And it's not just a decision made by the principal, solely the principal. I think our school does a good job with shared leadership and sharing that leadership and just being open and listening to some of those changes, which gives teachers a little bit more power and influence of what happens. And, we can share our voice so we're not just given the change and not just kind of just served to us. So I think that through my early years, I felt like I was a little bit powerless in those decisions. And when I started to really reach out and put myself in a position to where I could communicate with the leaders, I mean, leaders are actually looking for this, looking for teachers and other people in the building that they know they can rely on to help with these things. So I have enjoyed that role of being able to have some sort of control or power or just even more information that I can just disseminate among the rest of the staff to help the change go a little bit more smooth.
Yeah, I love your examples, Alejandro, because I think we often and Leslie and Michael and myself, we've been in the classroom, but it's been some years now where we sit in a more centralized role, making these big decisions. So it's always important, I think, to hear what happens when that comes into the classroom, and then how do you translate that for your students? So I have a follow-up question for you having to do with change. And I love that teacher's perspective to help us understand how it feels. So oftentimes when we seek input around any big changes. It could be attendance zones, it could be grading policy, it could be new curriculum. Wherever we seek input, we often have very formalized ways of seeking input. We do teacher meetings, we work with our union leadership, et cetera, et cetera. But we also know, because we've all been teachers, there are more informal and probably more effective ways of really getting to what we say in Spanish, al grano, right? What's at the grain of the issue? What do we really think about the issue? From a teacher's perspective, what could we do better as central office administrators, as system leaders, to really create that environment and really get to el grano? What really matters? What are you really thinking and how it affects our students?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I would say that you mentioned it earlier, and just being a human and being having that humanity and building those relationships early. I think Michael mentioned it earlier about making those deposits earlier. Just build that trust. So when bad news comes or when a change happens, we know that it is coming from a place of trust from someone that has built this relationship with us, someone who is coming empathetically and knowing how it's going to affect me in my classroom and my students, and being able to communicate with me in a way that, we talk every single day. So this is just more news that you're giving me, and we are, friends and colleagues. It's not just served to me on a piece of paper and an email, or this is not our only conversation throughout the school year. This is my close colleague telling me a difficult thing, a difficult something that is going to change or something that might be challenging. And I know that we're going to be in this together because I know I trust this person. So putting those deposits in early actually definitely makes a huge change.
Thank you. Thank you. Julie?
Yeah, I want to just kind of wrapping this up. And again, we could spend hours listening to the four of you discuss this and really unpacking it. But we know that, for often many of the leaders or educators on this call, it's their first week back in the office, or maybe some of them have already been, in the classroom and their school's already going for a couple of weeks. Nonetheless, I think everybody's come here hungry for maybe just some nuggets of wisdom or some tips from all of you in terms of like tangible next steps or actions. So I'm wondering if we could go around to each of you and just get a thoughts for what would be your advice or piece of wisdom or next step or action that you would impart to all of those educators that are on the call with us today so that they can hopefully make one more positive step in the direction to try to create this type of culture of care that we've been talking about, whatever may happen across the school year.
I'll start very quickly, and then whoever wants to take it from there. I think the advice that I would give to anyone listening on this call today is just start thinking about what is going to be your approach around dealing with change, because change is going to happen. Hopefully the three buckets gives you a little bit of a framework to think about those buckets of change. But it just starting to think about how are we going to deal with change this year? Or God forbid we have traumatic change. How are we going to deal with it? How are we going to deal with instructional changes? How are we going to deal with maybe walkthrough changes? But if you think of it from the humanistic perspective, believe me, you already have lots of common sense that will help you inform and help inform the policies that you have in place for this school year. So the first step to cleaning up your room is picking up the socks. So this is my admonition: pick up the socks. Just start thinking about how are we going to deal with change this school year.
I will say that for all of us to not underestimate the way that we manage change and its impact on students. Don't forget that poorly managed change is felt, seen, and heard by the young people that we are serving. It can show up as inconsistent expectations from classroom to classroom. Adults who are not seen or heard are going to appear stressed, distracted, and certainly disconnected. So you know, our young people are very smart. They read adult behavior. They are so sensitive, right, to our tone, the relationships, and even those inconsistencies. So they're watching. They're watching all of us. They're watching if we're giving mixed signals during change that, right, is not managed well. Um, so don't overestimate that our young people are watching and they can sense when we as adults are not tending to the emotionality and the humanistic element.
I would share, and those are both great, Richard and Leslie. I would add to that and share as you think about and you're considering change, how are you going to do with people and not at people, right? And so many times we're great at, it's a top down, we got to make, and some decisions need to be made, but where as you consider whatever the change is, where there are opportunities to do it with the people, to be able to engage, because what I've learned, and I know everyone on this call would agree, when it's done together, people feel more empowered. They feel more a part of the process, to feel like they've had voice in it. And so just consider that, whatever that change is, and really thinking about doing it with the school faculty, with a community, with a student body, rather than at individuals, is what I would say.
Yeah, I love that, Michael. I agree, and change is inevitable. And all of us who worked in schools know this. Changes happen every single year. But just communicating often and being visible, being vulnerable, celebrating those small wins. Sometimes it's just small things that can really allow people to understand you better. And also remember that culture is built through hundreds of small interactions each day. It's not like you just throw this one event and everyone is a big fan of you. It is just small interactions each day. I mean, I try to think of very specific things that my favorite leaders have done. And what's funny is I don't really remember the initiatives that they put down or different things they implemented, but I do remember how they made me feel.
Well, that is a really great segue to the next final, the frosting on the cake that we have for all of our people in the webinar today. And I am mindful of time. I apologize, we're going to run just a few minutes over, but I do want to let you know, if you're able to stick around for about 5 more minutes, we are going to share with you next, actually a video from Dr. Diaz's classroom, which I think exemplifies everything that you're talking about in terms of those daily small things that we do to affirm relationships. So here we go. Oh, having a bit of trouble with the video. I apologize. While I am pulling that up, Richard, I'm gonna have you just kind of wrap things up for us and share with us your kind of final thoughts and wisdom so I can buy myself a few moments to deal with the tech.
Yeah, absolutely. And just for everybody, I'm having a little bit of an unstable connection here. So if I drop, I'm sorry, but I'll try to hang on here. Um, Look, my final thoughts is this. Obviously, you don't know what's going to happen. Change is, by definition, unexpected and often traumatic. And it can feel traumatic. Uh, but I think as leaders, the more we prepare and think of our mental frameworks, our mental scaffolding, if you will, around how we're going to deal with change, it gives us the ability then to be able to lead those that we have for whom we have responsibility. And I think if it's gotten everybody to think about those in your care within the system, if you're in the classroom, you have a lot of little people under your direct care. If you're in a school, you have lots of little people and big people. If you're in an administrative office, a superintendent, you've got the whole kit and caboodle under your care. It's important that we think about how people address and receive and feel about change. And that's been the whole point today. How do we get to start to think about that? And again, I want to thank Sanford Harmony for the ability and the opportunity to bring together my colleagues who are so learned about this particular topic, and hopefully spark some thinking in the minds of everybody on this call.
And thank you, Richard, for those closing thoughts. I'm going to ask actually Amanda, who is doing our tech side of things in the back. Amanda, can I kindly ask, will you please put the link to that video in the chat? I apologize, I'm having some technical difficulties and that link is not coming up for me. Alejandro, I hope you all know we all promised to watch it and are excited to. I've heard it's literally moving, so I promise we'll all watch it so that we can be end on this note of being inspired by you. But on that note, we do want to remind you that you are always invited to join our Harmony webinars that we provide on a regular basis. I do also want to point you to checking out our new website. If you haven't checked out Harmony in the last 2 days, you are in for a treat because our new website actually is completely up and running. It has new engagement activities, all sorts of tools to make planning and working with Harmony even easier than ever. I also want to let you know that we do have our Belonging Together strands. Richard is one of our esteemed panelists that we work with on the strands who really focuses on creating leadership conditions to ensure student success. So we ask you to reach out to us if you're interested in having Richard come and work more directly with your school to help build change. And then finally, just want to end by saying thank you for being with us today and appreciate your patience with some of the technical difficulties. At the end, you are going to see that some feedback will come up. We would greatly appreciate if you could take a moment to answer that feedback so that we can do our best next time and forever move on with Harmony, trying to support you in the best way we can. So thanks again for everyone. Thank you again, Richard, Alejandro, Leslie, and Michael. We greatly appreciate your time and all that we learned from you today. And thank you all. And thank you for the video link. It is now in the chat.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great school year.
Have a great year.
Thanks, folks. See you.
And DC